Welcome to another episode of Tarot Tuesday. I am your host, Reverend Adam Hayden, and we've had a lot of things happen in the last week or so, and nothing happened during the inauguration. Thank gosh for that. Um, my vision of a assassination did not come to pass, and I am so very thankful for that. Let's see, what else have we had happen? Um, Things have actually been pretty quiet on the political scene, if you really think about it. While our new U.S. President Joe Biden, has done a lot of executive orders and stuff, heading towards the right direction, I think we're still in the middle of a storm that we haven't seen the other side. This is merely the eye of the storm. There's going to be a little time of calm, and it's going to lead into the results of the actions that have been taken. Now, last week's reading, we had two cards show up in different formats, and so this week's reading, amazing enough, I have two of these cards on hand. They are in different places. The first one is Justice Reversed. This one has been put in the past position. Now, we know that justice is about sovereignty. We had touched upon this last week. Well, this time justice appeared in the reverse position. Now, this causes certain nuances of the meaning of the card to change. And so now with the justice reverse, we are looking at the creation of injustices. We are seeing dishonesty, false charges or witnesses, and poor judgment. And on the U.S. political scene, I do believe this has to do with what had been going on with the Republicans in the Senate. They're realizing that the things that they had supported wasn't necessarily what they wanted to support. And now if this is a truly heartfelt change, I think we should embrace that. But we must always be cautious about how we interact with those who have harmed us. We have to keep up our boundaries. Safe and effective boundaries is a safe and effective mind. And so this card is showing that we are denying the truth or the real motivation of these individuals. And it may not even be on a political scene. It could be a coworker. It could be artificial elementals that harass you. I believe Donald Michael Craig called those little nasties. And they are thought forms or projections that are on a higher frequency from us. And so we cannot physically, tangibly see them, but we can see their interactions within the energetic fields. We can see their interactions in states of depression and melancholia. Basically, we are seeing the forsaking of justice. Well, I think we've forgotten, within the political scene, we've forgotten some of the other big things that were in the news before the pandemic hit, before the insurrection happened, and that has to go back to the thing with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Many people have forgotten this or pushed this aside, and because a lot of these concepts were taken and used by QAnon as some of the reasoning behind their actions. I'm not saying that pedophilia and human trafficking don't happen, because they do. And it's across the political spectrum. It doesn't matter if you call yourself a Democrat or a Republican. These people do exist. They are not just in positions of authority. It is a sickness within inside them, that a hunger that can never be quenched. And so we're going to see this happen. It's about a hunger that can't be quenched. It's about unfulfillment and needing to control others. It's a very, very distinct, systemic, really, form of consciousness. These are the holdovers of the last 2,000 plus years of cultural indoctrination. The fact that not even very long ago, and some people still today believe that women and children are property, or they'll state that that's not true, but in their own interactions with those that they claim to love, you see these kind of mentalities. And we also see it in other arenas of our lives. We see it in divorce courts. We see it in domestic violence issues. We see it in so many other arenas that it's so prevalent, we no longer see it. We have been so covered with it that we don't even bat an eye anymore. We're not even upset in the ways that we need to be upset that these things actually happen. I think we've numbed ourselves to the realities of the world around us. We've sanitized everything and come out the other end with a lack of understanding of how life and death works, and how our mentality has been so twisted and altered to fit a certain status quo that is no longer beneficial to us. And as I mentioned previously, when this car showed up, way back when, it was back when we lost our wonderful Supreme Court Justice. And so we're seeing what she did, because this is the Lady of the Fountain in this deck. What she did is she made a lot of changes in our justice system that have been whittled away within the last 4 years. And so with that in mind, we've got to really take a look at those events that she did partake in. We really have to look at how those laws and changes to our Constitution have been of benefit to our country and to the world at large. Now, I'm the last one to sit there and say that America is a great country, because, as we know, anyone who's ever studied history or has lived on the streets knows this country is far from it. But there are certain things that we have been brainwashed or indoctrinated to view as the status quo for the world. And those are beliefs in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And now I'm not going to get into all the different, legal entanglements or international warfare type things, but these are just things that we naturally all have within us. And until we can stand up against injustice, how do we expect our representatives to stand for justice? We can't, because they have to represent not just their own moral injunctions, but they have to represent the injunctions of every single one of their constituents. And so we cannot expect these changes to happen until we become the change we want to see. And so the Justice card in the reverse position in the past, which, as I mentioned before, covers last week, the last week we just had, we see the need to go back and look at what we find to be justifiable. What is justifiable for me and what is justifiable for another person. But we must ever be mindful, because we can pontificate on what is considered right or wrong until we're blue in the face. But until we actually do something with it, justice is blind. Justice is blind because we can't see it. The difference between the justice in the monuments and the Lady of the Fountain in this card is she's not blind. The blinders have been taken off. She can see from a greater vantage point, even beyond the concept of the human race and human laws. Human laws are substantiated only for humans. We cannot force our laws and rules on other forms of life because we do not build our civilizations anymore to really contemplate that these other forms of life are just as unique, diverse, and it's just as special as humans are. We have elevated ourselves. So we cannot force what we believe upon the rest of the world. And we've done that. You can see that in all of our strip mining, in all of our frickin' drilling. You know, we don't even, we get, that's property. Just like women and children, they're property. They are owned by whoever has the money and the dough. See, that's not true. In the greater scheme of things, that is not true. And we have lost that. So I think what we're beginning to see is the injustice of a whole section of cultures that have arisen. We've got to look at the patriarchy. We have to look at least the last 5,000 years of caste systems being used to trample upon individuals. You think we are that far removed from kings and queens here in the United States? Oh, no. No, we don't have kings and queens anymore. But our representatives get huge donations from various corporations. And these corporations feed into each other. Pharmaceutical company, they can basically charge whatever they want here, and we will just take it. No, we don't have kings and queens, but we do still have a stratified class system. And heavens forbid those classes mix. And see, that's wrong. That's wrong on so many levels. Life is not a hierarchy. Life does not go vertically. It is a horizontal rhizome, or a small branch of a greater whole. And us humans only are one little piece in that great circle that we call life and death. We are one little piece. So when we do our justice, we have to remember that. Now, in the present card, we got the Four of Wands. Now, Four of Wands, if you can't see, has 4 poles with flowery, and it looks like it could have been easily used in some sort of wedding. If you can see that. Very beautiful card. Now, the Four of Wands is a card of action. It is a card of celebration, of social events and romance and fertility, of virtue, vigilance, and restraint, which are rewarded. And so we are seeing the building of alliances and friendships. Because of the way our country is ran and how divided we are, we've actually found through social media not just ways to divide, but we've found ways to connect in ways that we never thought possible. And the reason is because we have moved away from physical interaction. And it's been building. It's been building for, honestly, since at least MySpace. This building of international communication through different frequencies. This isn't the first time that mankind has done this. If we take into consideration that there might have been previous civilizations that have had similar type technologies and for more spiritual advancement, may have used some of the same concepts using crystals to create what may now be considered the whole Akashic records or whatever. I'm not a real big new agey person. I don't know the details of those things because I don't view things from the idea of monism. I am very much an animist and believe in the interconnection and complete separateness of living entities. Now, the Four of Wands being for this next week, from this Tuesday to next Tuesday, we see that there is an equilibrium developing. We are seeing the sloshing of waters from a great tsunami begin to even out. And I think that's what we are being warned about, is we're in the middle of the storm. We are in the eye of the storm. Excuse me. Good coffee. But the thing is that this time, celebrate your achievements. Celebrate what you've accomplished in this period of time, even if it's just sitting on your butt, because there's nothing wrong with self-care. Absolutely nothing wrong with self-care. We are raised in a society where your value is based on what you do for others. But what about what you do for yourself? Don't burn your candle at both ends, because that's just going to make it so much more difficult for you to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. The Four of Wands is also a card of balance. Now, Four of Wands also tells us that we must look to our emotional and psychological well-being. And this means that we have probably all gone through some form of shadow work during this time, not just individually, but as a culture, as a soul group, so to speak. We've begun to look at our systems, our institutions, how things are run, and how we would like to see things run. And this goes on also with the situations in our own homes. Do we see where we would like to make improvements, and how do we make those improvements? I myself have been dealing with this very strongly myself, and I'm pretty sure that there are others out there as well, on how do you balance physical health and spiritual health, mental health and emotional health, and how do you interact with those around you? And now is the time to really embrace the interconnectivity between us and other than human entities. Interacting with other than human entities is, I like to view it just like I interact with any entity, whether human or unhuman. So if I treat you with decency, respect, and the fact that you are also a child of the same source as I am. And it's so true. It is so true that by seeing that interconnectivity, you can better connect with others. You can better resonate with others. And so while we've seen this division in our own country and many other countries around the world between one worldview and another worldview, we are also realizing that both these extremes have problems and issues with them. That only by looking at the concerns of both sides will we be able to truly nitpick and see how we want to go from here as a species. And in the future card, I got the Eight of Swords. Very depressing picture. Or so it seems. The Eight of Swords is about frustration, about feeling powerless and at the mercy of others, the controlling behavior of others, feeling like a pawn and just vulnerable to deceit around us. This is covering the week after this week. This is when we're going to start to see the good stuff happen. And I mean the good stuff in the sense of not the trouble that it'll bring, but the end result from that trouble. We're going to see a lot of legal actions. We are going to see a whole host of communities and groups receiving that justice. Receiving the justice for terroristic acts, receiving justice for domestic abuse, we're going to see a continuation of the driving home of the injustices that we would like to see gone from this cycle. Eight of Swords is a card of also being misunderstood. We have to be very careful on how we phrase our words, because words have power. The wind indweller himself gave us the breath of air so that we may learn to speak, and to speak with power, because every breath used is power used, and power communicated between realms. And so when we say certain words, we are putting into motion a host of forces. And so I tell you now, be mindful of your words, whether written or spoken. They have power and they cause change. So be mindful of those things you say to others. Be open and compassionate if you're misunderstood or you misunderstood someone else. Take a step back. It's not about ego or pride here, people. It's now about understanding both sides. So I ask you in this next week to contemplate and ponder what has been said here. This next week, I also will begin my first season and episode of Fairy Friday, and I will slowly be going through the Oath of Belonging, which is sort of a article of belief and a solemn vow I took as a fairy traditionalist. It kind of maps out all that I do believe and all that I hold myself to, and I figured I would share my personal thoughts and considerations on this monumental text given to us by Robin Artisan as a member of the Killican Caragwin. And we're seeing a lot of stuff happen in that community. And so I'm hoping to bring this out to all you. And of course, soon I will be moving away from certain other things and beginning another show, and it is called The Dragon's Voice, and it is going to be more of a Welsh-inspired set of videos due to my own personal path. I might even say forget Fairy Fridays and just move that in, because fairy traditionalism for me is very much drawn from my Welsh ancestry. I've always been a Welsh witch. I've always been drawn to the Mabinogi and to the gods and goddesses and ancestors of that branch of my family. I used to be a student of the Church of Yatwilateg and the Celtic Church of Dwynwen Wyn a while ago. I never got very far. I had stuff happen in my life, and I just was never able to finish those courses. But it drew stuff home and mixed in with what I had learned from family members and our own family myths and legends and stuff. It always had a Welsh bent as well. And so I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do The Dragon's Voice as its own separate show. And I don't know, may even become the name of the ministry. I've kind of drawn away from doing specific things like that because of legal implications. My ministry is not 503C or whatever that code is. It is not a legit ministry. I do pay personal taxes on everything that's donated, not just the taxes that are taken through the services I use. So honestly, out of the donations I do receive, I get very, very little of those donations for my expenditures for this ministry. But you know what? The ministry isn't about the status quo. My ministry is not about myself. My ministry is about something greater than that. Something that has been forgotten. It is a ministry of re-embracing our humanity. Something that is about re-embracing our connections with everything that surrounds us. And it is very much an animistic ministry. And so I've been watching some videos on money and its spiritual implications. Now, I've always had an issue with the concept of receiving money for spiritual works, and I know there's many others out there who have felt the same way, and it's partially because of our culture. Our culture minimizes the importance of spirituality, of religion, of other forms of healing modalities. We sideline it. Not because there's no legitimacy to a lot of the spiritual implications, but because we are in the shadows of a time where a religious organization or organizations performed usury. For those who don't know, usury is accepting payment for spiritual favors so you don't burn in hell. Yeah, honestly, that's where the fear of money and spirituality mixing really came to the forefront. When the Catholic Church would, because they were losing money, would wish to achieve certain goals for their organization or provide for the lavish expenditures of its priests, they would sell indulgences. These are rituals done on behalf of a person who is willing to pay money to not suffer the injustices of hell or purgatory for very long. Basically, they were paying off their sentences. Wow. How prison-like. So we even see in that the injustices of our private prison system stuff, which I'm glad Biden touched upon and wishes to divorce private prison practices from our United States. Thank you. But no, let me go back. Usury was the selling of indulgences. Because there is no physical, tangible result of giving money, receiving indulgence for a sin, we have a whole host of people who believe that, well, why should we give of our resource? Because money is a resource. Why should we give up our resource for something we can't see? But see, they do the same thing. Christian organizations still do the same thing, if you really think about it. When they ask for tithing or a donation to their church, aren't they selling themselves and not necessarily the gospel? Is it how they speak or how they twist the words from which the scriptures came to appease their audience? So I've always stepped back from accepting donations, selling services such as tarot readings and spiritual coaching, stuff like that, because the whole concept of paying to get out of hell and money is the root of all evil. But I was watching a video on a channel called Spirit Science. It's something that me and my child watch during our quiet time because it's as closest to something spiritual that's kid-oriented that I can have her watch. And there's a movie about spiritual money, how we view money. And honestly, I was contemplating on how much I devalue my own services compared to other people. And I never thought of that. I always believed that the reason I kept my prices so low is because I want to make sure that my services are available to the masses, to as much people as possible, especially during a pandemic. But I realized in the end, it was my view on money itself that is my backdraw. I constantly fail to see, because of my own circumstances, how much of a tool it actually is. What, I read that we can tell people's priorities by where they spend their money. And I really realize that now. Where we spend our money is where our priorities are. So, with that in mind, I've been more mindful on where I spend my money and how I view the money that comes in. And because of that, I've been able to achieve great things for my patrons. Thank you. Hopefully, in the future, I'll be able to provide more services to have a little better setup, and who knows, maybe go somewhere greater with my talents and skills. And so I wanted to let everyone know, thanks to the patrons and clients I've had in the last year, I have now fully paid up for my Witchcraft 2 course with the Temple of Witchcraft Mystery School. My tuition's all paid, and I'm ready to go and have been accepted. And so that will begin in March, and I will begin a new, beautiful quest deeper into my spirituality and practice, and maybe provide more experience to provide greater help to my clients and patrons. And so this was another episode of Tarot Tuesday with your host, Reverend Adam Hayden. Don't forget, you can follow me on my webpage at reverendadamhayden.weebly.com, or you can also find me on Facebook at Reverend Hayden. Now, I hope you all have a blessed and wonderful week, and I will see you soon.